Hello. Coming up, we'll explore digital transformation in the age of COVID, touching on the broader subject of what is digital transformation, what are the benefits and risks related to going down this path, and what are the risks of not doing so. And finally, how has COVID affected how organizations plan and prioritize their transformation efforts? From beautiful and exotic Detroit, Michigan, I'm Daimon Geopfert, and these are just some of the topics we'll be exploring in this November's monthly Cybersecurity Advisory. Welcome to the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, the unified voice of the AICPA and CIMA. Every week, you'll get insights from inside the accounting and finance profession that help you stay ahead of the curve, whatever your business and wherever you're based. Again, my name is Daimon Geopfert, and I'll be acting as the host for this week's session. I'm a partner with RSM and the national leader for their security and privacy consulting services. Our topic this week is digital transformation in general, also a focus on how COVID has altered how many organizations are approaching these efforts. With the sudden shift to mass remote workforces, interruptions in customer and business relationships, and reduced revenue creating restrictions on available resources, the conversation around digital transformation is drastically different than a year ago. Joining me to explore this subject are Ravi and Greg Fritzky. Welcome to both of you. Before we get into the discussion, I'll ask each of you to tell us something about yourself, where you're based, something about the kind of work you do, and why today's topic is particularly important. So, Jerry?
Thanks, Daimon. Really appreciate it. I'm glad we're able to do this together again. So welcome, everyone. My name is Ravi. I am the national leader at EisnerAmper and partner in the process risk and technology solutions practice. We focus heavily on culture and especially digital. I focus on digital maturity and risk management as well. I always put out the mantra of peace of mind around reducing risk and improving processes while really maintaining good governance. And as Daimon said, this is a different time for everyone. I hope everybody's safe and well. We've all been through a lot. And ultimately, what I'd like to talk about through this session is how you build that culture, how you start to take advantage of what's going on in the world of digital, because we're seeing a lot of movement there. So you'll hear me talk about how to start and how to actually move through it, and also how to manage and monitor your risks while you're doing it.
Yes, hi, and this is Greg Fritzke, Practice Director at EisnerAmper. Work very closely with Jerry. I'm very happy to join Daimon and Jerry on this session today. Very much focused in the digital transformation space. I've spent the last 25 years helping clients understand and leverage technology. And one thing about myself I let you all know is I do play guitar, and I am in my little guitar studio today. So looking forward to a good session today to share with you insights and information.
All right, thank you, Greg. And I'm actually going to go straight to you. And the first point we want to hit is we've already used the term digital transformation multiple times in just the introduction to this podcast. But in many ways, it's like quote unquote cloud, where it really is interpreted different ways by different people. So to properly solve a problem, the first thing we have to do is define it. So if you don't mind, can you guys talk through your definition of what digital transformation is? And then in any ways, has it changed due to what's going on with the COVID situation?
I'd be happy to. Digital transformation is many different things. Simplistically, it's using technology to implement change. And ultimately, it's about making meaningful change. I think in the last several months, we've seen a lot of folks looking for opportunities to leverage cloud solutions and other technologies. Now that we're all working remotely, those technologies are more critical than ever. So digital transformation is something that isn't always planned. Most people think of it that way, but sometimes it's reactive. I will say that it also is leveraging technology better. It's not necessarily implementing brand new technology, but looking at the resources, the people, processes, technology you have today, and looking at holistically to implement change. You can look at it from different perspectives, whether you're looking to make change around the way you use data or how you do processing today. If you're looking to automate processes or just integrate your systems better, digital transformation encompasses all of those things.
Jerry, do you have a take on it?
That's a great point, Greg. On how you define it. From my perspective, I go back to that mantra that I mentioned, reducing risk and improving processes. I would say we've been trying to do that for a number of years. And where we actually have fallen over in terms of it taking longer is where we see the digital culture or the mindset come into play. We're not thinking of digital transformation every day. At least 5 years ago, we weren't. We heard about it. It was great. We heard about automation, even tools like robotics process automation, which I know Greg will talk a little bit about. But we never set the stage. And there's key aspects to deploying a digital solution. So what I want to talk about are the building blocks about that mindset. And I think that's a big shift. Let me just give you a quick reference. So many of you may have seen some social media outlets put out this reference and ask this question. And the question is, who led the digital transformation of your company? Was it A, the CEO, B, the CTO, or C, COVID-19? And the answer, which is kind of a joke, is COVID-19. Now, there's no joke about COVID-19, obviously. It's not that we're deminimizing the impact of what it has done to people in our lives. But ultimately, what happened here was we had to rush into it, and some did. Some were prepared, some were not. So what did we do? Our minds literally shifted. And this has happened in the past, whether it was during a recession or different crisis events that have happened around the world or in a particular area of our country, whatever it may be. So in the beginning of COVID, we were focused on business continuity and saving cost. And all of a sudden it turned into a digital blitz, as I call it, to this new normal. Everybody was trying to engage. Everybody was trying to innovate. They were coming up with innovative ideas or trying to outperform their competitors. This is more than just thinking about virtual conferencing and virtual events and getting together on a live stream. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually making how we do things and what we do better, more efficient, more effective, and looking for ways to do that constantly. That was not happening prior to the beginning of COVID. So this crisis actually allowed us to take a big shift. I call it an actual paradigm shift. Our digital maturity as we were before the crisis changed drastically. And it's not too late, from a management perspective to even start now. So in essence, we have a little more tolerance to, let's call it, fail when it comes to digital. We're trying new tools. The culture and the way we're experimenting with different tools is now all over our companies and around our homes, whatever it may be. We just shifted to a different world. And there's one thing I've learned in my 20 plus year career is helping clients really successfully deploy and transform, mostly on the finance and accounting process side, but ultimately around operations. So the one key factor with all of this is the data and the technology that comes with it, right? So I know Greg's going to talk a little bit about the data later in the next piece, but ultimately I want to make sure that we identify the fact that we have all of this data coming in and there's solutions that we can use to make sure we mine it. So this is truly where the value is, and I think it permeates throughout the entire organization, whether you're large or small. It's going to be long lasting, and I think the return on investment you'll realize for years to come. And please don't overlook the competitive advantage here. You will see a competitive advantage if you use this every day, this mindset, this mantra, digital IQ, if you will, your employees, your customer and client engagements, all of that. So digital, in the finance and accounting world, which is where I live the most, they're on a journey and they're applying solutions all the time, which is fantastic. It's great to see. It's music to my ears. We've been talking about this for many, many years, and now it's coming to fruition. There are some stumbling blocks, which we'll talk about a little later, but they're stepping across all industries. This idea of what they can do, what we can do with technology is just changing our everyday lives. Is it disruptive? The pandemic is disruptive, but ultimately I think we prevailed here. We embraced it. We dealt with change. We dealt with it quickly. Now we can turn back and see what worked and what didn't work. So the speed of change has accelerated. So let's not marginalize that piece as we're persuading ourselves, our teams, and even looking at myself in the mirror as a leader in my organization, in my firm, am I acting the part? Am I bringing digital every day? Am I showing my team that I could do it? And in essence, that's what I'm doing. And I'm asking myself that question all the time, every day. So here's one thing I'll leave you with, and this is more about focus. It's why we do what we do. I always focus on the why. The what and the how comes next, but it's very important to understand, why are we doing this? You don't have to rush into it, but understand the why. There's an objective. So we could fail a little bit, and there may be a lack of understanding or a lack of vision, but come back to why, because that'll bring the understanding and the vision to fruition. So before COVID, you had tech haters, you had different groups of people. You had those that may be on the emerging side. You had those that were sitting in the middle, that are dabbling in it here and there. But we all know these different groups, the early adopters, etc. But the tech haters and those that didn't want to embrace it, all of a sudden what shifted, and this gets back to the paradigm shift, they now are seeing the value. So this is the first time in many years that everybody on that line sees the value in digital transformation, because they have to use it. They were forced into it. So they're no longer tech haters. They're seeing that it's fragile. So we still have to be careful with each of those groups, whether they're employees and clients or customers, but understand that that's a big shift.
Thank you, Jerry. And Greg, I guess I'd ask for your thoughts on some of the points that Jerry made, and I'm narrowing the field here a little bit. We're talking about all of the fingers that digital transformation has, all the paths that it can flow down through an organization. From your background, if you were talking with an organization and they wanted to know what are the most common areas that people that look like them target for digital transformation traditionally, what are the first targets, the first movers that it's easier for someone to move into that space? And I guess a little bit of a follow-on, which is, has COVID changed that? Is there a change in prioritization of what organizations want to target for digital transformation, respective of the current situation?
Yes, absolutely. We've seen a lot of focus even before the outbreak with regards to automating processes. It's amazing how many manual activities we perform when we look at our organizations and we look at the different parts of the enterprise. Finance accounting is a great space that we often look at. Just think about your own monthly processes around financial close, reconciliations, journal entries, all that process. When you look at a process end to end and you can identify 80, 90% of it is just producing an outcome. Those have been targets for a number of years now. Worked with clients on those processes for some time. But now even more so with the regards to trying to scale your operations when everyone is remote. Looking at data across the enterprise and trying to bring it together and make sense of it and have more real-time information. These are areas where people are focused on. I call it intelligent automation. So now it's more about not just eliminating the doing, but getting real and deriving real value out of your data. Understanding what your information is telling you, and maybe being able to perform activities that you did on a monthly basis on a real-time basis. In the risk space, which we all know very well, a lot of focus right now on continuous monitoring and controls and being able to test a population of 100% of transactions in real time. Compliance, regulatory matters. These are all things that have been around for some time and just has been expedited, those reviews now. So absolutely, that conversation around automation never goes away. It's just driving value, and that's going to continue for the near future and beyond.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a great point even on the data side. So data management is one of the things that we see quite a bit, whether you're using tools like the Microsoft stack with Power BI, Tableau, and other means to be able to look at the metrics that maybe you had an issue with in the past. So the speed of change is coming, and you want to be able to use those tools. I'll give you a little bit of a statistic, and I'm seeing that this at our clients as well. We're seeing a 50 to 60% uptick in employees and clients wanting training on these technology tools. Many of the companies and vendors that provide you with those tools obviously are seeing that as well. So you're probably seeing the activity there. But ultimately, There is not one conversation that I go to where we don't talk about what technology are we going to use here to enable us to manage and monitor this process effectively. So again, I'll go back to the concept of, the culture. It's people and process that drive the transformation, not really the technology. It starts with us. It starts with the process. So there's structure. So the technology is then applied and adopted. And we're just having more conversations about that. So using bots and analytics and engaging in that and fully understanding what it can do is really, really important. And one of the key factors that I've really honed in on in terms of impact, how it's impacted my clients the most. And again, this is companies of all sizes, whether it's a startup or a $5 billion manufacturer or tech company. It's about customer and employee engagement. So what you're finding is that your customers or clients are wanting to engage with you differently. Just the other day, I had a client say to me that I want to interact with you through the means of the technology that we use versus you picking up the phone and calling me, because everybody's actually extremely busy, even busier now, and actually being more productive in some ways. So they want to manage, and they're honing in on, I want to be very effective at using my time. So ultimately, it's how your client wants to engage, and that's improving. So I would guess that, and I would encourage everybody that's listening to understand what your customers and clients are looking for when it comes to tech enablement. Understand how they're consuming your services and how you're interacting with them. I would imagine that you would see a lot of improvement there, and you're going to be able to brainstorm with them the tools that they're even using that you may be able to adopt, or even vice versa. So we're in the business of consulting. We're always advising clients. So ultimately, that's a dialogue that happens all the time. So again, I'll go back to, it's not just about having a virtual meeting, and it's more about sharing and collaborating. And that includes your employees. Again, it's people. So your employees are in that mix along with your clients, how they are engaged in doing the work, managing, monitoring, interacting with you as a leader, if that's what the position you're in. And then you can get down into the processes. So people first, then process, then technology. So ultimately, you think about those accounting processes that Greg mentioned and the financial close, and think about how hard it is, or how hard it was prior to COVID to be able to close. We'll go back for a second, actually. What you were doing prior to COVID in your accounting and financial close process, you may have been in the office, so things were there for you to get, but it still took you longer. But now, again, going back to you're forced to be remote, what do you need to do? So now let's streamline how this information, this data is moving through our systems. Let's use better tools, and this is where bots come into play, to even collect cash, manage our AR, all the way to financial reporting and FP&A, or financial planning and analysis. We're just seeing a huge uptick in the tools that are being used in many of the areas around accounting and finance to manage and monitor it better. So going back to even what Greg said about manual processes and charting that course, look for that, bring the efficiencies to the table. And ultimately what you'll find is you're going to get more ideas. We're seeing a lot more ideas come to the table these days now that we're remote, because we do want to be more efficient. So don't be afraid to ask your teams to bring you those ideas. Talk to your clients, engage. This is the time to absolutely engage and adapt and be agile at the same time. So you have to try things along the way. We're seeing a lot of different tools, though, especially on the accounting side again, and certainly on the collaboration side.
So, Jerry, I'm going to hook into a few points that both you and Greg there, and I'm just going to use some terms. We're talking change, rapid change, mass change within employee communication and processes, change within customer communication processes. Somebody listening to the podcast, in the back of their mind, that can probably feel a little bit unsettled by what you're hearing. There's apparently a lot of risk as you go through and talk about what comes with digital transformation. Now, anybody that's in the space is going to tell you there's both risk for doing something and risk in not doing something. Can you explore that a little bit deeper there, of where have you seen this go bad and how could it have been avoided? But where have you also seen risk come up on people that then avoid this and put themselves in a bad situation?
That's a great topic, near and dear, Daimon, to what you and I see and what Greg also sees in the marketplace. I mean, we have to have a risk and compliance lens. And there are definitely a lot of situations where you can make a bad decision, certainly. And the key is, overcoming and being able to revert back very quickly, and understanding what we did. And typically it starts from the beginning, right? It's thinking about it. Don't leave the discussion about risk for later. I think having a governance framework and an operating principle here is really key. Those that set that up prior to COVID, that had a good governance framework and were good stewards, when it came to technology and adopting it, they were already doing it. And what they did was tweak it. They made it even better. They were even more agile. But there has to be some element of governing what you are putting in to your systems, especially putting controls around it. There are some things that you can wait on, but ultimately you have to focus on what data you're receiving. And what I would say is you prioritize. So one governing principle is prioritize what information you're going to be using it for. If it's a collaboration tool, you may not be at risk there, but have a way to do a very quick and agile, call it risk assessment, and do that continuously so you can monitor what's happening. And that could be the basis of your decision. So virtual conferencing, the key elements, like what can go wrong question. I know it's a cliche question, but it works. Ultimately, ask yourself that question. What you want to be careful of, though, and this is where I've seen some challenges, is taking a big step back because of risk. You cut back on your overall investments because you're afraid that we're going to get hit with a hacking attack or some issue around cyber, and you're not going to deploy a new technology. That could be a bad decision. There's a way to get through it. You just have to be careful. Now, what you can do, and this is where the other side falls in, and Daimon, I know this is your area of expertise when it comes to information security, is you don't want to be deploying all this technology and then also at the same time cutting back on your cybersecurity investments. That's a bad decision as well. And we've seen that happen in a number of different areas. We've now deployed more resources to bring in new technologies to us. But you know what? We're not going to do as much on the security side. I think you have to look at that and balance it. You got to be very careful there. So cutting back on cyber investments, definitely not something that we recommend our clients do. We think you actually increase that, make the investments. I know a lot of the businesses out there may be struggling. It's a matter of then sitting back and what can we do and what can't we do? So just be very careful. You can deploy one tool instead of three. That's fine. But ultimately you want to deal with rapid deployment as you're going through this risk lens. Now, back to process automation, it saves time, right? Resources. You can eliminate a lot of what I would call risks associated within that process related to human error. So when you think about risk and deploying the technology, you're actually mitigating the risk even better than you did in the past. So don't just think about deploying technology from a standpoint of we're going to have customer engagement. That's one aspect of it. There's an element of deploying technology to actually manage and monitor our risk better too. And we've been seeing an uptick there as well in terms of the tools that are being used. So that's a huge advantage for you. And now that allows you to take those resources. Now you're being more efficient on the risk side, whether it be cyber or otherwise, and getting rid of that human error. Now you could redeploy those resources somewhere else to look for another digital solution. So one other key aspect that we do see is just on the implementation. You still have to have a way, even though it's agile and you could be quick and rapid, you have to think about key things. And I mentioned cyber is one of them. Think about security. There's so many more endpoints. So endpoints, everything connected to the network, every device. Think about endpoints in that way. They're all sitting out there. Now they have to be managed. How many endpoints, new endpoints are we bringing into our environment? What are we doing with our cloud providers, our cloud solutions? How many do we have? Do we even have an idea of how we're going to monitor that? Let's just be careful with that. And I go back to the data. Where are the inputs and what data are we going to be maintaining? And can we put controls over that data? You can ring fence some of these things. You could do that through licensing. So I would be careful with deploying new technology. If you have to give it to everybody, you need to think about the risk first and foremost. That's a really key aspect. So if you could prioritize based on who you're going to give it to, where it's going, and what data. and the provider that you're using ultimately. So there are certainly some failures that have happened when it comes to data being put out there that shouldn't be there, and you have to remediate it at some point. So what you want to be careful of too is that the regulators, if you are a regulated entity and in a business that's regulated, financial services, insurance, banking, et cetera, certainly there's a whole framework around what you need to follow. So the regulators are going to be honing in on what you've done, and let's call it the past 8 to 9 months as we've been going through this. So access controls, change management functionality and controlling that, storage and backup, third party and cloud providers. So your team can actually help you manage and monitor this. Your clients can even help you give insight on this as well if they're engaging with you with the technology. You just have to have a process to do it, and you want to be able to do it rapidly. And that's the give and take. You don't want it to take too long, but some things may have to take longer than others if the priority and the risk is higher. So we can put that on a different pendulum, if you will, a different work stream, and have a different process for that and how to manage it.
So Greg, Jerry hit on a lot of points there on basically the risk of not moving ahead and the risk of moving ahead and how COVID has changed that. I'm curious on what you're seeing from your aspect in those areas.
Yeah, just to kind of echo his sentiments, one of the important things is to make sure that when you embark on any of these journeys, you're defining the outcomes that make sure they're achievable. Quick wins are very important. You learn from these technologies by doing proof of values. If you go in too large, too fast, sometimes you miss the mission, if you will. So I would say that some of the worst stories I've seen, are around, too much, too fast, project fatigue, not getting the buy-in early on with the proper stakeholders, and including the business or, the process owners of the processes you're trying to transform. At the end of the day, you need them to get behind it and learn the technology as much as anything, and making sure that you deploy these technologies to everyone. So, those are important points. And I think his point about cyber is well taken. Absolutely. I've seen projects fail because they didn't include the risk and security people till it's too late. Projects are great when they're siloed, but once they go across the enterprise, it's difficult to move these things forward unless everyone's comfortable that there's controls and governance around them, like any good project. And finally, it's just, communication, making sure that everyone understands what they're learning, that they're being enabled, they're being trained. Too many technologies get kind of pushed out and people don't adopt to them because, frankly, they just weren't trained up and they don't understand what the desired outcome is. So very important to make sure everyone's enabled, and communication is absolutely key.
Okay. And as we wrap up today's sessions, we just want to walk through a little bit of a summary of what we've talked through today. And the biggest points that we hit on were going to be just simply the definition of digital transformation for those organizations that keep hearing the term. The concept is so broad that it basically is left up to your own interpretation. But especially with the COVID situation, it's how quickly can you pivot and use the technologies that are available to modernize your processes and workforce to work around some of the changes that are being forced through organizations and your customers right now. On the risk side, very much of a focus on what is the risk of moving ahead and disrupting your business at what might be a very fragile moment, but then also the risk of not doing so in a very competitive landscape, potentially having competitors leapfrog over top of you. So Jerry and Greg, I'm going to give you a moment for any final thoughts before we close out.
Great. Thanks, Daimon. So my final thought is focus on the culture and building that digital mindset every day. It's not too late. Now is the time, especially since we've given it a little bit more time now and we're getting through it, and we will get through it. And make sure to build a team that know the importance of risk as well. That's going to be a key aspect. So it's both a digital and a risk mindset together. So it starts with attitude and why you're doing it, and you can stay agile and adapt along the way.
Yeah, and I would add that, technology can be implemented in many different ways, no matter the size of your company. It's very important to understand where you're starting from and what your end goals are. Again, communication is key, managing it, managing projects and making sure that everyone's on board is going to make sure you have success. And ultimately, as you look at the digital landscape, learning it, working with others, consulting firms, advisor firms, very important to, look at the opportunities of working with outside parties to bring knowledge that you might not have internally. And you'll ultimately accomplish your goals that way.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And that's it for this month's Cybersecurity Advisory edition of the Go Beyond Disruption podcast. Thanks to my co-presenters, Jerry Ravi and Greg Fritzke. If you'd like to connect with them, we'll put their profile links in our show notes. To view the notes, just tap on the episode's info icon in your podcast app and your smartphone or tablet. You can also open this episode in your computer's web browser. That's where you also find further information and links about digital transformation in the age of COVID, including the online resources we mentioned during our discussion. Remember, you can have a look at the archive of back episodes as well. We have more than 130 of these at your fingertips whenever you want, provided with our compliments. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts daily, and then visit gobeyonddisruption.com. That's gobeyonddisruption.com. I'm Daimon Geopfert with RSM. Till next time, keep listening, keep safe, and goodbye.